Hey, this is Liam, your narrator. Just want to say a very quick thank you to all of you listening, watching, commenting, liking, subscribing, sharing, and all of that good stuff. It really helps out the channel and is much appreciated and very encouraging for me. So with all that said, let's get into the story. My name's Stanley, an undertaker by trade. Never thought it would come to this. Me becoming the one who gets boxed up. But here I am, 6 feet under, writing my final story in the dim glow of my dying phone. My business has always been the dead. Not your flashy crime scene stuff, just normal people passing away. But I should have known better when that body came in. The body of Alfred Winslow, a notorious spiritualist in our town. Rumour had it he'd been meddling with things beyond our mortal realm. But I just laughed it off back then. Winslow was meant to be my routine job. Dress him, box him, bury him. But when I was preparing his body, I noticed something odd. A strange amulet clung to his deathly pale hand. It was an unusual trinket, ornate, old, and despite my years in the business, something I hadn't come across before. Disregarding my intuition, I shrugged it off as a religious artifact and left it be. Later that night, as the shadows grew long, the eeriness began. I was alone, doing paperwork in the flickering candlelight when I heard a strange rustling. I looked around, expecting to find a stray animal or a misplaced draft, but instead, my gaze landed on Winslow. His corpse lay there, as it always did, but the amulet was glowing a dull, unnatural purple. Suddenly, the ground seemed to shift beneath me. An icy chill filled the room. I looked back at Winslow, his eyes wide open. 2 vacant, sightless orbs staring right at me. Then a horrifying smile spread across his lifeless face. I watched, paralyzed with fear, as his stiff body started to move. I tried to run, but I was rooted to the spot, held in place by an unseen force. Winslow rose from the table, his once lifeless body animated by some unnatural force. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. My voice was strangled in my throat. With an eerie grace, Winslow moved towards me. The strange amulet in his hand pulsed with an ominous light. And then he was upon me. His icy hands reached out, and with a touch, I was overwhelmed by an onslaught of horrifying visions, seances, dark rituals, and demonic pacts. I felt a searing pain in my chest, and then, darkness. When I woke up, I was in a box. My box. I could feel the polished wood beneath my fingers, the satin lining of the casket. I pounded on the lid, but the thud of my fist was muffled by the layers of dirt above. My heart pounded against my ribcage, a futile rhythm against the crushing silence. So here I am, trapped in my own casket, my body racked with terror. The tiny air pocket I have won't last long. I'm sure of that. As I write these last words, the reality of my situation dawns upon me. The sad irony isn't lost on me though. An undertaker, ending up in his own product. Alfred Winslow's amulet, its pulsing light, haunts me even now. A symbol of my macabre fate, trapped here with nothing but the cold comfort of darkness and my dying phone's glow. I can only hope This story finds its way to the world above, a tale of an undertaker's end, a supernatural fate no one should ever endure. And as the glow of my phone dies, so does my hope. The darkness is all consuming now. It's cold down here and so very, very quiet. The fear subsides, replaced by a melancholy acceptance. My end, it seems, isn't going to be a peaceful sleep in a warm bed. I'm Stanley, the undertaker, and this is my grave, my final resting place. When I was 12, I almost became a permanent resident of Shady Hollow construction site. Don't believe me? It's a true story. Well, I'm Jacob, your friendly neighborhood storyteller, and I'm here to give you the whole bone-chilling, hair-raising, grinning-juicing scoop. My pals and I, we were nuts for skateboarding. Me, Tommy, and Mike. The Shady Hollow skaters. That's what we called ourselves. I remember the day it all happened like yesterday. We were at our favourite haunt, an abandoned construction site on the edge of town. It was a creepy labyrinth of skeletal structures, half-finished walls and yawning pits, perfect for exploring and practicing our tricks. Of course, my mum would have skinned me alive if she knew where I was, but hey, what she doesn't know won't hurt her, right? I was trying a new trick I'd picked up from a magazine. It was called the 360 flip. You know, spinning the skateboard 360 degrees while simultaneously flipping it. Except I didn't flip 360 degrees. I flipped straight into an open pit. Darkness swallowed me whole, like falling into a giant's mouth. The last thing I remember was the echo of my friend's screams. Then, silence. All I could feel was the cold, hard concrete beneath me and the weight of the earth above me. I was trapped, kind of buried alive. I screamed and screamed until my throat was raw, but only my own echo answered back. I thrashed around like a fish out of water, but the earth around me did not care. It was like being squished in a giant dirt sandwich. Meanwhile, my mind started playing tricks on me. Is that a scurry of rats' feet I heard? Or was it the wind moaning through the narrow gap I fell through? The darkness became a canvas for my fears, projecting grotesque figures of ghouls and monsters. I thought about all the things I'd never do again. Never see the sun, never hear my friends' laughter, never taste my mum's pancakes. And the humiliation to be remembered as the kid who ended up a permanent part of the construction site. As I lay there, giving up hope, I noticed something strange. A slight breeze was flowing through a crack in the concrete slab that had sealed my fate. Suddenly, I had an idea. Desperate, but it was all I had. I started blowing into the crack, hoping that the dirt above would move, creating some space for me. Hours seemed to pass. My lungs burned, my lips were chapped and raw. But miraculously, it was working. Bit by bit, the earth above shifted. Hope surged like a torrent, and I kept at it, blowing until my lungs were ready to burst. Suddenly, I heard voices. My friends. They were calling out for me. I mustered every bit of strength and screamed back, "I'm here!" The reply was a chorus of joyous yells. With the help of the local fire department, I was pulled out of my grave, alive. I'd never seen the sky as beautiful as I did that moment. I've never felt as grateful for anything as I did for that gust of air. From then on, the Shady Hollow skaters disbanded. We traded our boards for safer hobbies, and the construction site, it became a park. They named it Jacob's Park. Now isn't that cool? So if you ever find yourself at Jacob's Park, looking at the plaque with my name, remember the kid who almost became part of the concrete. Remember the laughter in fear and the heroism in a puff of air. After all, I'm Jacob, your friendly neighborhood storyteller, and I've got a million more stories to share. Alive. My name's Gemma, and I'm trapped within my own body. Before this, I was just a normal girl, an adventurous one, always ready for the next trip, the next journey. But a school camping trip was my last adventure, it seems. I remember the canoe tipping over in the murky water, the desperate flailing, the struggle for air, the cold darkness, and then blank. I woke up, or at least my mind did, in a place filled with flowers and soft murmurs. I tried to sit up, to move, speak, but nothing responded. I was a prisoner in my own body. It was like screaming into a void, a voiceless echo that nobody could hear. That's when I felt it, the tears falling on my skin. The muffled sobs, the cold touch of a final goodbye. My mother, my father, my friends, and Tommy, my little brother. But the horror really set in when I heard the priest's words, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. I was at my own funeral, being buried alive, yet not alive. A terrifying realization gripped me, a fear so deep it's hard to describe. I wanted to scream, to cry, to stop them, but nothing worked. I was a silent spectator to my own burial. Suddenly, I heard a voice, a familiar one. Tommy. He was speaking to me, in that same tone he used when we played our secret games. Jemma, he whispered. Are you there? I tried my hardest to respond, to make any sign, but all my attempts were in vain. A little later, I heard him talking to our mother. He said he heard me screaming. The disbelief and sadness in her voice was palpable. She told him it was his grief talking, that he was just imagining it because he missed me. My heart ached for Tommy. He was so young, too young to understand death. And here he was, the only one who seemed to know I was still there. As they lowered my coffin into the earth, my paralysis became my silent scream. I could feel the thud of each dirt clump on my coffin. The fear was now replaced with a numbing grief, a slow understanding that I was losing everyone I loved. There, in the dark, with each thud of earth on the wood, I felt an overwhelming sadness. I wanted to comfort Tommy, to tell my mum and dad that I loved them one last time. But all I had were my thoughts and my silent screams. As the thudding stopped and the voices above faded, a chilling loneliness seeped into my coffin, joining me in my eternal silence. The faint sobs of my family were the last thing I heard. I tried to imagine them, huddled together, cloaked in grief, trying to comfort each other. And as the silence took over, my heart broke for them. For Tommy, who believed he heard me. For my parents, who lost their daughter too soon. There I lay, buried alive, a silent spectator in the chilling drama of my own death. The terror of my situation and the grief of my loss now coexist within me. Gemma, buried alive, my voice unheard, my fears unseen, trapped in a coma, locked in my own tomb. The only witness to my story is the darkness that now envelopes me, and the silence that has become my only companion. I was never one for believing in reincarnation, but here I am, Michael, or at least I was. I woke up in total darkness, my mind foggy and disoriented. The last thing I remembered was the hospital, the beeping machines, and my wife's tear-streaked face. I remember feeling peaceful, slipping away. Then suddenly, a violent gasp for breath and darkness. The shock of my new reality set in slowly, like a creeping chill. I tried to sit up, but my head banged against something hard. I felt around, my fingers brushing against the smooth, polished surface. I was lying down in what seemed to be a casket. A chill ran down my spine. Panic flooded me as I took in a horrifying realization. I'd been buried alive. I felt a wave of anxiety and fear like nothing before. I pounded on the lid of the casket with all my might, hoping someone would hear. But the only reply was the muffled echo of my own desperation. My voice was hoarse from screaming, my knuckles bloody and raw from banging on the hard wooden lid. I remembered stories of olden days when they tied a string around the finger of a supposed dead and ran it above the ground to a bell, just in case they weren't really dead. They could ring the bell. But in this cruel twist of fate, there was no bell for me. Time lost its meaning in the all-encompassing darkness. My body ached from the cramped space. My mind raced with horrifying thoughts. Was this some sick joke? A punishment? Or had I really been reincarnated, only to be trapped here? An oppressive silence surrounded me. Each breath I took felt like a luxury. Each minute alive, a miracle. Each thought, a testament of my will to survive. But the fear was an unwelcome companion, a constant reminder of my grim predicament. As my screams faded into whispers, and my pounding turned into feeble knocks, despair crept in. I was alone, completely and utterly alone. I missed the sun, the laughter, the simple joy of existence. I missed my wife, the pain of not being able to see her again, to hold her, tell her I loved her. That was more agonizing than the confined darkness of my casket. Depression descended like a dark cloud. I found myself in a strange limbo, alive but not living, reincarnated but buried. I was Michael, trapped in someone else's grave, forgotten by the world above. As my mind wandered to the life I used to have, the life I was cruelly snatched away from, Tears streamed down my face. The echoes of my old life were fading, replaced by the stark reality of my present. A buried man in a borrowed body. I had so many questions. Whose body was this? Did they have a family? Did they know their loved one wasn't really dead? The cruel irony of it all was unbearable. Then I realized something more terrifying. Reincarnation meant a new life. But here I was, buried in a body of a man who had just died. Does this mean death was my new life? As my breaths became shallow, the oxygen running out, I knew the end was near. This was my fate, to die again, alone in the dark. I'm Michael, and this is my story, a tale of life after death, of horror, of fear and despair. As the darkness claims me, I can't help but think of the twisted hand of fate that has led me here, reincarnated into a grave. Hey, it's Liam again. This is a little Easter egg for all of you who have stayed right up until the end. Big thank you to all of you. And I look forward to sharing more stories with you very soon in the next video. Take care.